sell 8 billion cans per year.
Let that sink in here for a second.
That's a lot of aluminum.
8 billion cans. It's not 8 billion in revenue. No. It's 8 billion cans.
They've done some things very differently to succeed that tech can learn from. And when you think about, well, I'm in B2B. Well, really, B2B is just a slower version of B2C. Let's be honest, that's what it is. It's a slower version of B2C. So you can still apply some of these learnings.
And then the crazy thing is, then they win this thing like 4 times in a row now, right? Isn't that insane? It's like, well, you know, if you wanna be successful in your life, I guess you gotta drink Red Bull. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You just have to.
No, it's true. You know what? The intro music kind of reminds me of. Have you seen Gone in 60 Seconds?
Better Days.
Yeah, the heydays. Have you seen Gone in 60 Seconds, like old school Nicolas Cage movie?
Maybe. I don't know.
Where it's basically they nick cars. They steal cars. It's with Angelina Jolie and Nicolas Cage. It's like for all the millennials out there. Yeah. Let's watch that again and have some fun. But like they have this ritual where they have to listen to Lowrider and just stand there and take it in. And it's the same for us. Like we have the intro music. It just really gets you going, right? It gets you into the mood. But ever since we switched to remote, async recording, whatever we want to call it, we can't really play it. So you and I, we can't hear it unless we do it like Gone in 60 Seconds.
It's because of Riverside. Let's just be clear about this. That's actually
Riverside's
the reason.
fault.
Why can they not create a third audio line for this one so we can listen to it when we want to listen to it, but take it out when we don't want to?
So actually, what we would really appreciate as host is that you send a complaint to Riverside saying it's really frustrating that our hosts of the revenue formula cannot hear the intro music while recording. It's very disruptive. It's very disruptive indeed.
Yes, it's a biggie.
It's a biggie. And also, like, so the thing is, like, how do you then get going? How do you summon the strength and energy to, like, really deliver those punchy remarks, the great segues, all that stuff? Like, what are there any kind of cheat codes? Anything we can consume here that would help us?
No.
You're such an idiot. That was like the perfect setup. And you screwed it intentionally. You could drink a Red Bull.
We could drink something. You
could drink a Red Bull.
Yes.
Come on, right? You could have an energy drink. So what the heck are 2 tech leaders, go-to-market leaders in software startup recording an episode about Red Bull, by the way? What's going on there?
Why is it that we actually want to talk about Red Bull? Right? Kind of how did we even... So and I think also the setup of the show today is going to be a little bit different, actually. You know, usually we talk about the bow tie and all of these things in there and some growth hacks and some pricing and some AI. But today we actually want to, look at a company like, in this case, Red Bull, which I'm sure everyone here is familiar with, and dissect a little bit how they got to where they are. Because many of us, if you're like, our age, you kind of grew up, it's like, oh, this was already a big company. And I think people forget really quickly that, no, wait a minute, this was actually a small company also at some point in time.
Yeah.
How did they make it? How did they get where they are right now? And why are they doing all this stuff that they're doing, right? And we wanted to kind of start this journey with Red Bull because it's just so visual. It's so vivid what they're doing, right? So you can really kind of hang on to that.
I think it's also like when you think about it, they've done some things very differently to succeed that tech can learn from. And when you think about, well, I'm in B2B. Well, really, B2B is just a slower version of B2C. Let's be honest, that's what it is. It's a slower version of B2C. So you can still apply some of these learnings, and we'll definitely try and take some of those insights and turn them into, hey, here's some examples from software, from tech. First, we just wanted to give a bit of context because probably not everyone knows how Red Bull came to be the company that they are today. So just some background stuff here. Started by a duck farmer out of Thailand, producing basically a drink to keep you awake. This was a big market in
I totally
Thailand,
thought this was
drinks.
a joke coming. I was kind of going through the notes.
I was like, no.
Running through the notes, like, where does it say the duck farmer thing?
This is a duck farmer. This is the first bullet. Basically, a duck farmer started one of the world's most famous brands. He met an Austrian. They hit it off, built Red Bull basically from there. It's available in more than 170 countries. They do sell 8 billion cans per year.
Let that sink in here for a second.
That's a lot of aluminum.
8 billion cans. It's not 8 billion in revenue. No. It's 8 billion cans. And then you still kind of multiply this by, I don't know, what does it cost? I don't even know. Depending on the country, obviously. And
€2
then you
maybe?
get to the revenue number.
So the thing is, they charge a premium. We'll get into that later, but they're a premium price brand. How did they get so successful? Well, you know what they did, which is also kind of what VCs want in software? They created a new market.
Yeah.
I think you and I, you just said it, when you look back, you kind of take for granted, like, yeah, Red Bull has always been around. It's like, no, they haven't. They've not been around forever. They're like the first company that built the energy drink market, basically, is what they did. That's what they created.
And also the niche that they carved out. Is really the, people that don't want to drink cold coffee. Because that are maybe outside and kind of, I don't know, need energy for some freaking reason. That's the market niche that they found, right? And in the beginning it was maybe just a small niche, and now just snowballed into, well, there are the core folks that need this, quote unquote, need this, but then there are so many other people that just want to associate with that. It's like, oh, look at me, I have like a Red Bull. I'm also a skydiver,
or a parent, whichever.
Or parent, same. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I think it's also like from the infancy, when I ran through the research, it's very clear they were a different company almost from the beginning, because when you look at it, they don't own any production facilities. They don't own that. And I think you brought it up, and I had to really fact check. And it's like, no, you know what? I couldn't find any like black and white, here it goes, they own it. No, they have a bottler somewhere and stuff. So they don't have the production facilities. And it makes sense when you're starting out. That's actually a huge cost in the early days to invest in that kind of stuff. Also, they didn't go through very traditional distribution channels. Like they didn't. I heard the story about, what's it called, the famous super trendy water brand out of the States.
Yeah, like Death something.
Oh my God, we're so this is such a boomer thing right now.
You mean the Death guys, right?
Yeah, the Death what do you call it? Anyway, they tried to break into UK, and they failed because they couldn't get into basically all the retail stores where you buy groceries. It was too difficult to succeed there. And you know what? They had it's like you do a pilot of a new show, and when the pilot fails, it's like, cut it. Show's not going to happen. It's the same that happens there with those chains. It's like brutal. So what did Red Bull do? Well, they just went to nightclubs, universities, other places to then say, hey, do you want to sell this energy drink there? That was like their wedge in, basically. And I think Oatly is another, by the way, great example. They also had another entry point into the market, right? So they definitely did things differently. And by the way, as they started succeeding, when they entered a new market, they created scarcity, by the way. They created scarcity. So Abercrombie & Fitch, they did something almost similar. They would hire folks to stand in line when a new store opened outside. So people are like, whoa, what is going on here?
This is one of the most ridiculous stories I have about Stockholm. So we're here in Copenhagen, and I've been to Stockholm a couple of times. And back then, like it was a long time ago, my wife and I went to a club. And to get into a club in Stockholm,
it is a long time ago.
It's a very long time ago. We didn't call each other wife and husband back then, I can tell you that. And there was like a super long line outside the club to kind of get in. Yeah. And you wait, and it's half an hour, and it's fucking cold in Stockholm, And then you get in and it's empty. It's basically, creating some kind of FOMO on the outside in order to get in. And these guys did the same thing. Now I would wonder, did they do this on purpose, or maybe they didn't have that much that they could actually, push to that market, right? Maybe it was not, 5 other people also looking at this hotel room kind of scarcity. Maybe it was like, dude, we just didn't have more,
Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit of the context here. Don't want to, go deeper now, because otherwise we might slip a little bit in terms of the episode. So let's kick things off by me asking you a question. What are they selling? What is Red Bull selling?
Obviously they're selling, sugar water with some caffeine in it, right? Kind of that's the first thing that goes through your mind, right? And then, you do the abstraction. We kind of talked about this. I kind of know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But eventually you kind of arrive at this point where you think they're probably selling like a lifestyle. They're probably selling a, wish of the world of a person that either they're living, and therefore they're saying like, oh, I'm living this lifestyle, so therefore I'm drinking this. Yeah. But the much bigger market is people that don't live this lifestyle, but want to, seem like they do, and then drink it. right? And I think it's kind of the party people, and then there's the adrenaline junkies. I think it's kind of those two basically that you want to associate with if you go for it.
Yeah. So it's like also common. You'll see Red Bull heavily if you go skiing on the slopes and you go après ski.
Yeah.
You'll see Jaeger bombs, which is Red Bull and Jaeger mixed together, right? So you'll see it a ton there. And I also think like it's not like people want to have that lifestyle indefinite, like identify it just as that. There can be a moment in time where it's like, okay, now I'm on a holiday skiing. Now I just want a taste of that life, right? So they're almost like, it's almost like you called it a movement. And the other example we talked about even before hitting record was Patagonia as well, which is much more around the carbon footprint, reuse, all the issues around basically the textile. And I think it's so spot on. Like what Red Bull has done is they started creating a movement of that whole adrenaline junkie world. And personally, I'm not the adrenaline junkie, but do I enjoy watching some of the stunts they make? Like, yeah, I think that is pretty awesome, to be honest. I think that's pretty awesome. And I think a lot of folks, feel the same. Maybe they're clinging to something from, the past when they were younger, or just want to, quite frankly, be part of it. I think, does that ring a little bit of a bell if you start thinking startups, by the way?
So exactly.
Who created a movement? What happened there? Should we, do you have something what comes to mind for you, Tony?
So, I mean, obviously everyone, like, what is it, 10, 12 minutes into the show, I was like, wait a minute, didn't these guys talk about tech usually? What's going on here?
Yeah.
So how does that connect back to our actual world that we're living in terms of, SaaS and AI and technology and so forth? Well, I think there are a couple of people that in B2B build a movement and monetized heavily around this, right? So kind of, and did this on purpose, which I would say kind of Red Bull did the same thing. They did this thing on purpose, basically, right? And the first one that comes to mind is obviously something around Salesforce, like, Mark Benioff and, basically talking about no software, that was this big thing and super confusing nowadays. Why was he talking about no software? It's like, there's like, There are things around it that totally made sense back then. And he was able to create a movement around this. And then you had maybe, if we stay in this HubSpot, inbound marketing, kind of, there was a movement around this, right? You tried, the Drift guys, no forums, it's kind of a movement around this. And then I would say very recently, and on top of everyone's minds, is kind of Clay. Clay is building a movement around go-to-market engineering. It's like, I am kind of a tech bro kind of guy, but I don't write any code and I want to help my company make money. What can I do? Previously I was kind of useless. Now I have Clay, I can do all of these wonderful things. And you can see how this movement is playing out on LinkedIn right now with the Clay agencies, with the meetups and so forth, right? And to a degree, I think those are equivalents in B2B that we sometimes see as a little bit foreign and weird almost. It's like, why would they do that stuff? Well, there are some companies in the non-B2B space that have been extremely successful with it and taking some inspiration from them, on purpose or not, but taking some inspiration for them and trying to kind of mold your own business around it. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea.
I also know Salesforce, by the way, they've also done a ton of things. Obviously, we covered their story endlessly, but they did a ton of things as well with the no software. They did rioters outside the CPO conference, right? Took out very different ads. They even have today documentaries they've created, et cetera, right? So there are companies who still have some of those flavors, right? So I definitely think there's something around the whole building a movement and not just being a seller of a product or a service, but almost setting off a desire that someone has, right? So, I mean, when we were building Roblox, one of the things we played with was the whole RevOps and system admins as the movement we wanted to create, right? And definitely resonated with a bunch of folks. I gotta say, a lot of people felt like seen with that message. And I think that is, it's difficult to create, but it's also doesn't mean you're guaranteed success, by the way. So let's continue into one of the other things basically Red Bull have done. You and I have talked a bit, at least off air, about a gentleman called Dave Gerhardt. You mentioned Drift. He used to work there as their CMO. Currently running Exit 5, which is like a B2B marketing community. Yeah. He talks a lot about building a media empire, which is kind of funny because now he's done it, right? But actually, very few companies in software has done it to the extent that Red Bull has. So I'm just gonna like outline some of the things they have. They have a TV channel. They have a TV channel.
So we're talking. By the way, we're talking back about Red Bull. Like
yeah, it's a Red Bull. Red Bull. They have.
Yeah.
They have a. It's not just like they spawn. No, they own a TV channel. Just to be very clear, right? They have a magazine. Like a actual magazine, just like what was it the John Deere used to have back in the day for farmers. They have a magazine about adrenaline junkies and that kind of lifestyle, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. They do documentaries. They do a ton of events and I would say athletic competitions with an adrenaline flavor to it. They do a ton of that stuff as well. I don't know. Do they own the Formula One team, by the way? Or are they just a sponsor? They own it. Yeah.
I also think fun fact, they own 2 Formula One teams.
2, yeah. It wasn't enough to have 1.
No.
They wanted to have first and second place.
Yeah.
It's like the Porsche ad from back in the day. It's like nobody's perfect. And then it's the Le Mans races they won. And out of 10, they lost 1. Yeah. So I like love it. But anyway, so they also own, I think Red Bull Salzburg, by the way. I think they own the team.
Yeah. And they have the same, it's not called Red Bull Leipzig because that's not allowed. Oh, so they now call it Rasenball, which is kind of like it's just RB. So everyone knows it's for Red Bull. But they own basically a Bundesliga team in Germany.
Yeah, it's great. And they were trying to buy my team, by the way. And it was like all hell broke loose over it. Anyway, so just think about it for a second. You are building a soft drink company and someone in the meeting says, guys, should we like buy or maybe build a Formula One team? This is like such a crazy decision to make.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen great examples yet in our industry of folks taking it to this extent. I know, by the way, so Adobe, they own a couple of media outlets like CMO.com, CFO.com, and similar. They own those, and they went and bought them to kind of make them part of their environment. So it's not fully true. Some have also done, obviously there's Dreamforce, some do conferences, right, as part of it. But I think to the extent that Red Bull has gone, I don't know about you. Have you noticed any that go to that length actually?
Well, I think it's difficult to go to that length, right? Because I think running a Formula One team, I think it's like 100 million in budget.
Yeah.
Like that's just like, so, but some similar things have been there, right? So you think about HubSpot buying inbound.org or something like this, kind of they bought this community there, right? You think about, I want to say, some of the analysts in the space, so like a Gartner, Forrester and so forth, buying the demand waterfall company. It was serious decisions and stuff like that, right? There are people that are doing that stuff from a media perspective. There are companies that are also thinking, I think it's a very, very small example, but we saw folks like Hockey Stack kind of building some kind of a area of media content that was basically supplied by influencers and so forth, right? Yeah. So people are, and I would even say the whole founder-led marketing, founder brand, all of that stuff is, very small versions of the same flavor to a degree.
I think you're right. Also with specifically the folks that jumped on the Audience Plus thing, which is what you're mentioning here with Hockey Stack. Lemlist did the same. I forget what it was called. There were a few others who actually did a pretty great job, I got to say, with it. You also have HubSpot. They bought the My First Million show.
Yeah.
Right? And a couple of others, actual media outfits. I know Dave Gerhardt was like, probably I'm going to end up selling my thing to a company at some point who just want to get that media.
Yes.
I think the beautiful thing you just have to realize here is you now own an asset where you're guaranteed reach.
Yeah.
That's what you have. Like if you want to place an ad in whatever, Forbes, go ahead, but it's pay to play, right? Red Bull now, just by affiliation, it will be like, oh, I got the Red Bull magazine. It's like, okay, do they need to even put in an ad now? It's like,
no, but what I think is even more awesome, especially with like a Formula One team, it's like you don't need to sit there and be like, what am I going to write about today? You don't have like any kind of content pipeline issues. It's like, my effing God. They're going on this next thing and this is happening and Max Verstappen does this and here's this other thing. And it's like, there is an endless stream of content coming out that is just a perfect fit for Red Bull, right? Kind of how can I don't know how fast these guys drive, like fast, really fast.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this is the definition of adrenaline, right? Kind of it's the definition, and kind of whatever they're doing, it's like every single piece of content fits exactly into what Red Bull wants to do. And then the crazy thing is, then they win this thing like 4 times in a row now, right? Isn't that insane? It's like, well, if you wanna be successful in your life, I guess you gotta drink Red Bull. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You just have to.
No, it's true. It's like that affiliation with success is just like the Nike playbook. It's such beautiful execution. And the other thing it makes me think of, by the way, is also something we've talked about in software, by the way. It's Disney. From the example of they think franchise. So they produce a movie. How can we use it for a roller coaster in our theme parks? What about all our clothing lines? What about, I don't know, toys, a million other games, you name it, right? So they have that kind of mindset. And when you look at what Red Bull has done here, it's kind of the same to a degree. It's like, I don't think they started with a TV channel. They probably came, to your point, to a place in time where they had so much content. They're like, hey, we'd be stupid not to do a TV channel. Like filling this up is not that difficult. It's more distribution. It all blends so well together with what we're doing. So they really succeeded building a media empire. And I just got to say, like, the power here is owning that asset. That's a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah.
It is massive. For someone to come in and basically disrupt Red Bull, they have to disrupt that entire value chain. And that is immensely difficult. I just got to say, it's immensely difficult when they own it. And what are you seeing now in software? You're seeing folks work with creators to get some of those steps done. They see, whether it's like creating ebooks or LinkedIn posts or podcasts or similar, right? You see some of those things slowly start to happen. And I think we will probably see in the next couple of years a company merge who really execute this perfectly. We will probably see that.
No, it's almost like, who's going to buy Mr. Beast? If anyone can, by the way. I'm not sure.
No, he's probably going to buy someone instead.
But you know what I mean? It's like, that would be the ultimate media outlet you want to acquire. It just would need to make a ton of sense for you to do it, right? But it's like, those are the kind of, ideas you almost as a business need to execute, where you like really think hard about, why would that make sense for us? I gotta say, kind of that part of like, why don't you just buy? I mean, now that I'm saying it, you have Visma here out of the Nordics. They own the cycling team, right? Kind of Jumbo Visma, right?
Yeah,
kind of
true.
they own the cycling team, and it has to do with precision and all of that stuff. And kind of they say, I mean, Visma is usually mostly accounting software, basically, right? They do all kinds of stuff, but the core is accounting, I think. Like, that makes sense, kind of, with the bikes and so forth. But anyway, kind of, I think there's sometimes a little bit of a blend between sponsorships and owning something. But there are some examples where I feel it's a little bit far away from software to go out and buy a Formula One team.
Yeah, I think it's not as clear cut, because the lifestyle. What are you going to sell, an adrenaline junkie lifestyle for folks who do accounting? Is like, come on, it's not gonna mesh that well. But I think you will find some of those elements where it's like, just think about the traveling sector. You could play with the traveling sector, right? So I think, let's leave the realm now of the media empire.
Yes.
There's a beautiful inspiration here, at least, I think, for folks to take away and think a little bit about how can you build a model inspired by what Red Bull is doing. The other thing I think that set them up to do incredibly well, and I get this is heavily a marketing case, right? But because they're very intentionally not a soft drink producer, but selling a lifestyle, it also means that they run their advertising fundamentally differently than anyone else out there. I just have to say, like, the stuff they do is crazy. And I don't know where to start. Honestly, I don't know which example to pull off first. But maybe just to kind of ease into it, I looked at some of their titles on their YouTube videos, and just to give you like just how well executed some of this stuff is. It's like, flying into an active volcano.
Click.
Wow, yeah. I gotta watch that, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
I jumped from space. And it's just like, where does this stuff come from? So I jumped from space. Let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
This you don't
crazy.
know what is the Stratosphere jump they did. This was basically, I think, was it a balloon or something?
Yeah, it was a balloon.
They all the way up to the top
Yes.
of the Stratosphere, I guess.
Yeah.
And then this guy, I don't know what his name was, would basically jump with a parachute and like a spacesuit on, actually. And this thing would be live streamed on YouTube. They had 8 million concurrent viewers watching this thing at the same time as it would
I
happen.
still remember watching this thing, by the way. And for some reason, I was in Berlin. I was on my phone. I was watching it over the phone. And it was so crazy. I was in the train. I was in the S-Bahn or something like this.
Yeah.
It was so crazy. I had to step out. It wasn't my stop. I stepped out, sat down, and watched it there. And then I still remember this. And then the stream cut out because he started spinning, right? And the stream cut out, and the commentator was like, "Oh, shouldn't be spinning that much. It's not really a good thing for him."
I can see you like standing up at the train station, but just screaming.
And like everyone was like, "He's dead." This turned from a great thing to a terrible thing for Red Bull.
Yeah.
And he obviously survived. Everything was good. But I mean, this was an advertisement stunt. And I'm not easily, I'm not easily swayed by this shit. I don't care about this so much. But I stepped out of the S-Bahn, sat down, watched it, and, almost lost my mind when they cut out the live stream because this guy probably died live on YouTube at that point, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to capture attention like this with something that's completely outrageous, well freaking done, well executed.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, like, again, who goes like, okay, guys, so for this year's marketing budget, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have someone jump from space. And then someone, sorry, excuse me. What do you mean jump from space? Yeah, he's going to jump from space. But how? We'll just get a balloon. This is easy.
No, I mean,
right?
the equivalent in software right now for something crazy is, let's do a Super Bowl ad. Like that's the crazy level people that, people go to right now, right? But
I also think you got to have respect. So most advertising today is going to be, let's do another version of a Facebook ad that we can just put out there. And
let's do a webinar.
Right? No, exactly. And the point here is like Red Bull, while they do some of that and they do the regular ads really well, by the way, it's not the core. Where they seem to spend most of their energy is to orchestrate some of these things. Honestly, that's what they do. And you just mentioned the final, NFL final, right? And that made me think of Gong. Even their ads, they're not just regular ads. Like they made something that felt like TV ads. They were also funny and interesting and still got their message across. And I don't think many folks take it even to that level, to be honest. Not many do. And I think it's also, part of it is also, well, we gotta be able to measure it. What if this crazy thing we want to do doesn't work? Let's play it a bit more safe, right? I think it's a little bit more difficult for folks to, with conviction, go in and make some of those bets. And I think the rare cases where it happens, it's because there's someone on the founding team or someone with a seat at the table who has a lot of power, who has a clear vision and really can pull this off.
But I also think, and you guys should listen back to the Udi Lederger kind of episode. He's the CMO of Gong, and he basically pulled these things off. He also told us 80% of your marketing budget goes to the normal stuff, 15% of your budget goes to experimental stuff, and 5% of your budget goes to the crazy stuff. You need to grow to a certain marketing budget size to have 5% being something that can pay for a, like in this case, a Super Bowl ad, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I don't know, but I want to say that some of those crazy stunts, the 5% of the Red Bull budget, and pulling something like this off probably took probably $10 million or something like this.
Yeah.
And you need to have a certain size of a budget in order to be saying like, okay, let's play around with those 5%, and those 5% turn out to be $10 million. Kind of you need to be a certain size in order to get there. But what I also see is they're doing kind of some smaller stuff as well, right? So I have like local events here in Copenhagen. I'm just remembering them jumping from a very known area here, kind of jumping from the roof of the opera into the water, kind of doing this kind of jump thing.
It's like a competition.
They were like wakeboard competitions here in the canals, kind of, and they're doing this everywhere basically, right? And it's that kind of grassroots stuff. Well, grassroots is the wrong word, but local stuff is pretty interesting, right? That they're executing really well. And
I think
then
what everyone knows.
Sorry, go ahead.
So what everyone knows is the Mini Coopers with the Red Bull on the back, right?
Yes.
That's also like a very local thing, and I don't think it's that expensive actually to have a student drive that car around and then drop a few crates of Red Bull at a university or somewhere else. It's like, So I think you're right. What they do well there is they have a very targeted local efforts. What you've seen in software is then someone basically renting out a coffee shop on wheels, parking it outside an office building, giving away, stuff like that to kind of be a bit present in a different way. I think it's different for us in software. We don't have a physical good you can give away in the same way. But the local effort, I think, is something they've done incredibly well.
There's something different that they're also now recently doing. So they've been working, obviously, sponsoring real-life events like forever, right? Kind of when you think about downhill dirt biking or skydiving or like all of these equivalents of crazy people doing crazy stuff. Like they sponsor that stuff. And what I've now seen more and more is that they're actually starting to go very much also into esports, right? Into basically electronic games. Stuff people play on Twitch, basically, right? Yeah. And, the starting point was everyone is doing is like, let's just sponsor the creator. Like the influencer, you have the mini fridge with Red Bulls in the shot all the time, right? Then you have like, here's a banner or something like this. And in one game, they now went so far to basically create a whole competition, sponsored the whole event, had maps built specifically for Red Bull with all the Red Bull themes in there. And this was, and basically they unloaded the biggest prize pool ever in this game. It's kind of a niche game. For some reason, I'm watching it right now. I don't know why. I'm also embarrassed.
Because, nerd.
But yeah, exactly. But, they didn't only like, here's a little bit this and there's a bit this. Can you put my banner here? It's like, you know what? We're going to take over this whole scene by this one big event and we're going to capture everyone's attention. And I don't want to say they go all in, but they basically kind of get to the tipping point, I want to say, right? By spending just a little bit more money and effort and then going from, this is a sponsor to, oh my fucking God, these guys are pulling off something crazy here right now. And I better drink some Red Bull.
So I think if I'm to dumb it down, what can you take away from this? It's like, they dare to do something that's kind of outrageous and very different, right? You and I talked about a while back ago about Mr. Beast, right? He would do a video where it's like, staying awake for 4 days. That already there is interesting versus no sleep. Like he really masters that stuff, and it's the same thing actually with Red Bull. Like I jumped from space example, right? 2 examples I have from software that actually pulled this off really well. Really, I think had the approach of what would a consumer brand do advertising wise. A recent one is Notion. They did a LinkedIn takeover. This was, don't get me wrong, this was coordinated. They hired a bunch of influencers, not just I think in the software tech scale-up scene, by the way, because their users transcend that, to basically have a AI avatar profile picture created. And everyone changed their profile picture with that. And you could go into Notion and have your own created. Pretty smart if you're not a user of Notion, by the way, to then go and play with it, right? So it was, I think, really well executed also as a way to position them being more focused on AI as a company, right? To be very honest. The other one, which is just straight up crazy, is Ryan Reynolds. He created an ad. I don't know if he owns a stake in the company or not, but he basically has an ad agency, Ryan Reynolds, funny enough. And they created an ad for a software company. I think it's called, I want to say Mountain or something. They do something with, doesn't matter, it's for advertising purposes on TV, but it's a software company. They hired Steve-O to basically eat a Carolina Reaper and then pitch in less than 60 seconds the software. And you can I'm just going to drop a picture into the video for you to see, and then you can go to YouTube and watch it because it is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious. And I think that's kind of like just a great point maybe to end this thing on, to say, hey, you have to kind of dare to do some different things. And there's going to be some very tricky conversations potentially to navigate internally as well. But at least we're a company that does 8 billion cans every single year. This is their playbook, and there are a couple of software companies who's emulated some of this as well.
Yeah.
So that's it.
So let's see. Let us know what you think about the format of the show. It's a little bit outside of what we've usually been doing. I think
there's no CAC payback analysis.
We can throw this in for Google purposes right now. But otherwise, let us know. I think we'll do 2 or 3 more of those, and then let's see where we go. Have a good one. Bye bye.
And thanks for listening. Bye.